She was cleaning the floor at a luxury party, and the millionaire thought she was a VIP guest. Before the story begins, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I really want to know how far this story will reach. And if you enjoy love stories full of emotion, twists and heartwarming endings, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way, you help this space grow and become part of this community that believes in the power of true love. Valentina Reyes was reaching the end of a long day. The sun had already disappeared beyond the horizon when she got off the bus in front of the seaside mansion in San Diego's most exclusive neighborhood. The Pacific breeze touched her dark brown hair, still damp from her rush to shower after taking care of her mother and preparing dinner for her younger brother. She wore her blue cleaning company uniform with a gray jacket over it to hide the old stains on the worn-out fabric. In the simple backpack she carried, there was a bottle of water, a container with rice and beans, and a change of clothes she rarely wore, kept for those rare moments when she needed to look a little more presentable. The mansion was massive, a white facade with marble columns lit by golden spotlights. Luxury cars arrived constantly, and wealthy people stepped out in evening gowns and tailored suits. Valentina slipped quietly in through the back, as she always did. Inside, expensive perfume smells mixed with the aroma of smoked salmon and red wine. It was a launch party for a new real estate venture by the Ellison Group, one of the biggest companies in California. She didn't know, but the host of the night was none other than him. Nate Ellison, 34 years old, scanned the ballroom with a blank expression. He wore a tailored black tuxedo, the satin lapels reflecting the light of the crystal chandelier. His dark blonde hair was perfectly styled, and his clean-shaven face made his grayish-blue eyes even more striking, cold and calculating. Surrounded by investors, models, and journalists, Nate listened to forced compliments and over-the-top toasts, but felt disconnected from it all. Until something unusual caught his attention. Next to the bar, a young woman was crouched down, quietly cleaning the marble floor. She seemed out of place, not just because of her humble action, but because of the expression on her face. It wasn't submission, but a kind of steady sadness, a silent dignity that stood in contrast to all the fake glamour around her. Her dark brown hair was tied back loosely, but a few strands had fallen across her face, lit by the soft ambient lights. Nate watched her, intrigued. Valentina, on the other hand, didn't realize she was being watched. A glass of wine had fallen, and she'd been called in to clean it up. Since she was wearing a jacket over her uniform and black pants that weren't part of her official outfit, some guests didn't even notice she was staff. One of them, rushed and clearly drunk, bumped into her. The sponge slipped from her hand, then dropped onto the wet floor. That's when a firm, deep voice sounded behind her. "Are you okay? Can I help?" Valentina turned around startled. In front of her stood Nate Ellison himself, the host. She didn't know who he was, but his elegant posture and analytical gaze were intimidating. He, on the other hand, thought he was speaking to an eccentric guest who had for some reason decided to clean up her own mess. She was silent for a moment, her heart racing. She looked down at the floor, at the sponge, then back up at him. "No need. I got it," she replied, quietly but firmly. "You have a strange look for this party," Nate commented, tilting his head slightly. "It's like you're far away from all this." Valentina swallowed hard. "Maybe because I am." Before he could ask more, a waiter came by and handed him a new drink. Nate hesitated, but slowly stepped away, giving Valentina one last glance, before disappearing into the crowd. She stayed there, on her knees, as if nothing had happened, but something inside her, and inside him, had started to shift that night. Outside, fireworks exploded over the ocean, their colorful lights reflecting in the mansion's windows. Valentina still held the sponge in her hand, her gaze lost between the shimmering lights and the memory of that grey stare that, for a brief second, had seen her as more than just a cleaning lady. Valentina was still on her knees when a different kind of murmur began spreading among the guests. The sound of hurried footsteps approached, and a woman in a golden dress and high heels whispered something to one of the security guards. Valentina quickly finished cleaning the floor and tried to stand up quietly, but her hands were still trembling. Her heart beat faster than she cared to admit. In the ballroom, Nate Ellison was slowly moving away from the crowd. His expression had changed. That woman he had just seen, quiet, alone, with an almost distant gaze, had caught his attention. She wasn't like the others. She didn't smile to impress, didn't overdo her words, didn't flatter him. There was something genuine about her, and that was rare at a party like this. He walked toward her again, this time with more intention. "You're not having fun, are you?" Nate said, with a slight smile at the corner of his lips, stopping next to her. Valentina hesitated. She stood up slowly, her jacket still zipped up to her neck, hiding part of her uniform. Her eyes searched for a quick way out, but there was nowhere to go without drawing attention. "Yeah, I don't know many people here," she answered, avoiding direct eye contact. "I came with a friend from the kitchen. I just got a little lost." "I see," Nate replied, tilting his head with curiosity. "But even so, you seem different, like you're watching all of this from the outside." Valentina forced a tight smile. "Maybe I am. This kind of party isn't really my world." He stepped a little closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "That's why I'm talking to you." Valentina's eyes lifted by instinct. She looked at him, and for a brief moment something sparked between them, something quiet, faint but real, as if two opposite worlds recognized each other for the first time, even without knowing why. But before she could say anything, a tall blonde woman approached. It was Madison Langley, a socialite known for her involvement in charity events and her constant interest in Nate. "Nate, darling, they're looking for you on the terrace for the toast," she said with a forced smile and eyes clearly scanning Valentina from head to toe. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, I'll be right there." Madison turned to Valentina with the same condescending tone used with strangers in expensive stores. "Do you work with Chef Julian? I haven't seen him around in a while." Valentina swallowed her shame, unsure whether to respond or just walk away. Before she could decide, Nate stepped in. "She's a friend. We were just talking." The blonde pursed her lips for a second, but quickly covered it up. "Ah, I see. Well, I hope to see you at other events. If you're invited, of course." Valentina felt her face burn, and inside, something started to crack. The lie had seemed simple until that moment, but it was about to collapse. She didn't belong in that place. She knew it, and every second they reminded her she was trespassing in a world that wasn't hers. When Nate walked off with Madison, she was alone once again. She quickly went back to the service area, unbuttoning her jacket and looking at herself in the small mirror in the staff locker room. Her eyes were teary. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "This was a mistake, a big mistake." In the main hall, the guests raised their glasses for the toast. Nate smiled for the cameras, but his mind was still on the woman who said she had gotten lost, and who, strangely, he couldn't forget. In the silence of the back hallway, Valentina took off her shoes and sat for a moment on the cold iron bench, her heart tight, her eyes fixed on the floor. But she didn't know yet. That night had changed everything, and even if she tried to run, fate had already been set in motion. The sound of clinking glasses still echoed in the hall when Valentina, now back in the service wing, sat down to take a quiet sip of water. She felt the metallic taste of anxiety in her mouth as she listened, in the background, to the ambient music and the sophisticated conversations of the people upstairs. She tried to convince herself that tonight hadn't meant anything, that it was better to forget those grayish-blue eyes that seemed to have broken through her deepest defenses. But part of her didn't want to forget. Half an hour later, while organizing cleaning supplies in the cabinet, one of the event coordinators came in hurriedly, holding a phone. "Valentina, Mr. Ellison wants to speak with you. He's waiting outside at the side entrance." Her eyes widened. "Me? Are you sure?" "Yes. He asked for you, said he wants to thank you personally." Valentina wiped her hands on the hem of her shirt and took a deep breath. She walked toward the side door, her heart pounding as if she were stepping into forbidden territory. And maybe she was. Nate was there, leaning against a black luxury car, his blazer slung over his arm and his tie loosened around his collar. The ocean breeze gently tousled his dark blonde hair. When he saw her, he smiled, a different kind of smile than the ones he gave in photos and interviews. There was something real in it. "I know this might seem strange," he said, getting straight to the point. "But will you have dinner with me right now?" Valentina blinked, confused. "Right now?" "Yes. I have a favorite restaurant not far from here. It's empty at this time. I need a real conversation tonight. And I think you do too." She hesitated. She was exhausted, hungry, still wearing part of her cleaning uniform under the coat, but there was something about that invitation that stirred something inside her, something beyond curiosity. "All right," she replied, lowering her eyes, "but just for a little while." In the car, the silence was thick. Valentina looked out at the city through the dark windows, while Nate drove attentively. They didn't say much, but his presence was strangely comforting. When they arrived at the restaurant, a cozy place with large windows and warm yellow lights, the atmosphere felt almost magical. Soft jazz played in the background as the waiter led them to a quiet corner table. Valentina was nervous. She didn't know how to act, what to say, or if she was making a mistake. She felt out of place but tried to keep her head high. Nate noticed her discomfort. "You don't have to pretend anything. I feel like you're already more honest than half the people I know," he said gently. She bit her lip, thoughtful. "And are you used to having dinner with strangers like this?" "No, actually I'm used to being bored by people who pretend to be interesting," he replied with irony. "Tonight, you seemed different, genuine." Valentina looked away. She didn't know if that was a compliment or a trap. She felt flattered but guilty. She still hadn't told him who she really was, and he still thought she was some eccentric guest from the party. "And what do you do exactly?" Nate asked casually. She froze for a second. She needed to think fast. Lie? Tell the truth? She chose the middle ground. "Let's just say I work behind the scenes, making things work without being seen," she replied, smiling with her eyes lowered. "That explains everything," he said. "That's why you seem to have something no one else there did. Freedom." Valentina almost laughed. Freedom. She had felt trapped ever since her mother got sick and she dropped out of college to support the household. But she decided not to shatter his illusion. Dinner continued with an unexpected lightness. They talked about old movies, favorite foods, books they never finished. Valentina found herself laughing at silly jokes. Nate shared childhood stories about the time when he was just a lonely boy in a huge mansion, surrounded by staff, but without a single true friend. "Sometimes growing up surrounded by everything feels like living in a castle without windows," he said. Valentina looked at him, her gaze softening. "And sometimes growing up with nothing feels like spending your whole life trying to reach a door no one ever opens for you." They both went quiet for a few seconds. There was pain on both sides, in different forms, but equally deep. When he dropped her off at a bus stop, He insisted on walking her to the lit shelter. He didn't ask where she lived. He just looked at her like he wanted to see her again. "Thanks for dinner," Valentina said, holding her backpack with both hands. "Thanks for reminding me that real conversations still exist," Nate replied. "Can I see you again?" Valentina hesitated. Her eyes were tired, but there was a spark in them. She simply nodded with a slight tilt of her head. As the car drove away, she stood there, the cold wind brushing her face. Her body trembled not from the chill, but from the storm inside her heart. She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, and still, she wanted to keep going. That morning, the sky over San Diego was heavy, as if the clouds carried the same tension that filled Valentina's chest. As she stepped off the bus, her knees felt slightly weak. She'd barely slept. Every word spoken the night before with Nate echoed in her mind, as if she was still sitting at that light wood table, surrounded by soft jazz and the attention of a man who, for a few hours, seemed to see beyond what the world usually noticed in her. But now, all of it felt distant, unreal, almost dangerous. The corporate building of the Ellison Group commanded respect. With its mirrored glass facade, it reflected the heavy sky, as if silently declaring, "There is no room for weakness here." Valentina entered through the back as she always did. Badge around her neck, grey coat over a white t-shirt worn with age, thin gloves on her hands. Every step down the wide, silent hallways felt longer than the last. The shiny marble floor amplified the sound of her steps. She was there to clean, nothing more. She rode the elevator to the 20th floor with her cleaning cart. She stopped in front of the dark wooden door with a golden nameplate, Nate Ellison, CEO. She took a deep breath, slowly turned the doorknob, and entered. The office was just as she remembered. Spacious, sophisticated with floor-to-ceiling. Windows offering a view of the restless sea. Shelves full of perfectly arranged books lined the walls, perfectly arranged, and in the background a painting with modern strokes she had always found incomprehensible. She was kneeling next to the corner of the main desk, carefully polishing the metal edges, when she heard the door swing open abruptly. "Valentina!" His voice cut through the silence like thunder. She froze. She slowly lifted her eyes. Nate was standing there, his expression completely taken over by shock. He wore a white shirt, still slightly wrinkled from the blazer he'd just removed, and his grey eyes, once warm, now gleamed with disbelief. What are you doing here?" She stood up slowly, her hands still covered with thin rubber gloves. Her face had gone pale. Her eyes, so often weighed with exhaustion, now carried shame. "I work here," she answered softly but firmly. He stepped forward, struggling to process what he was seeing. "You work here? You're on the cleaning staff?" Valentina nodded slowly. "You lied to me?" She took a deep breath. Her stomach churned as if she were falling into an invisible abyss. "No, I just didn't correct the impression you had of me. You thought I was a guest, and for one night I let you believe that." Nate frowned, hurt. "You let me believe we had something in common. You let me open up when it was all fake." "Fake?" She stepped forward. "Do you really think everything I said to you was a lie? You think I made up my pain, my story, my laughter? Or is the problem that now that you know I clean the floors of your office, it all feels less valuable to you?" He was silent. The truth hit him like a blade. Valentina stepped even closer. Her hands still trembled, but she held her head high. "You talked about living in a castle without windows. Well, I grew up with no roof at all. I slept with my mom and my brother in borrowed apartments, trading extra cleaning for food. Last night, when you looked at me, for a second I believed there could be space between our worlds. But today, looking at you now, I see there isn't." The room was completely silent. The sound of the ocean in the distance seemed far away. Nate looked at her, but it was like he was staring at himself, as if, for the first time, he realized how much he still judged without meaning to. "You could have told me," That's all. I would have understood, he murmured hesitantly. Valentina smiled, but it was a wounded smile. You think you would have, but you wouldn't. Because men like you say that until they see the broom in my hand. She removed the gloves carefully, folded them, and placed them on the glass desk. She walked to the door and before leaving, turned around slowly. Don't worry. You won't have to pretend to see something in me anymore, and I won't hide anymore. She walked out slowly. There were no tears, just the dignity of someone who had been discarded too many times, but would never again allow herself to be invisible. Nate didn't move. The leather folder he was holding slipped from his hand and hit the floor, but he didn't flinch. He stared at the spot where she had been standing, as if trying to ask for something he didn't know how to name. And there, for the first time in many years, he felt he had lost something truly valuable. And maybe he couldn't get it back. Valentina's words still echoed against the walls of the luxurious office as Nate stood alone. He didn't sleep that night. He tried to work, tried to forget, but all he could see, in the windows, in the reflection on the glass desk, in his own thoughts, was her face. The firmness in her voice, the raw and brave truth she dared to speak while looking him in the eyes. For the first time he felt exposed, stripped of his certainties, but the world around him didn't stop for an internal crisis. 2 days later, Nate had to attend a charity event organized by his business group in partnership with San Diego's elite committee. It was a gala night with press, investors, influencers, and the most well-known faces of California's high society. And to his surprise, or maybe hope, Valentina was there. She had been sent by the same outsourced cleaning company to help organize the inside logistics of the event. This time, there was no room for confusion. She wore her full uniform, gloves and badge. She was assigned to clean the hallway leading to the artists' and VIP guests' dressing rooms. Valentina knew he would be there, and yet she went. Because she needed the money, because her mother needed medicine, and because promising herself she wouldn't be affected by Nate anymore wasn't the same as actually being able to keep that promise. On the other side of the ballroom, Madison Langley, influential, blonde, heiress to a jewelry chain, and far too close a friend of Nate's since college, watched everything with a glass of champagne in hand and a cold smile on her lips. She had suspected something since the unexplained dinner Nate canceled to handle something personal, and now she was sure the cleaning girl was here again. It didn't take long for the bomb to go off. During the evening's official toast, when Nate was called on stage to thank the sponsors, Valentina moved quietly among the guests, picking up forgotten glasses and adjusting a decorative piece near the curtains. She tried to be invisible, but her presence was hard to miss. There was something about her posture, her calm among the sequined gowns and expensive suits that drew attention. That's when Madison, taking advantage of a brief moment of silence after Nate's speech, raised her voice theatrically. "Guys, sorry to interrupt," she said, with the tone of someone about to drop a piece of gossip disguised as concern. "But does anyone else here recognize that girl over there?" A few faces turned, confused. Valentina froze, the microfiber cloth still in her hands. Madison pointed with her glass. "It's her, the girl who was cleaning the floor at Nate's last party, and now, look where she's standing, right here in the middle of the ballroom, mixed in with the guests." A wave of mean-spirited chuckles echoed through the room. Valentina tried to step back, but it was too late. Maybe Nate's new social project is rescuing lonely cleaning ladies and turning them into gala companions, Madison mocked, drawing laughter from some of the women around her. Or maybe she's not just here to clean the floors. Maybe she's here to clean out his bank account too. The silence that followed was crueler than any laugh. Valentina felt her cheeks burn. Her heart pounded so loudly in her chest it nearly drowned out the background music. She looked for Nate with her eyes desperately. He was there, standing still, the microphone still in one hand, but he said nothing. He didn't defend her. For one eternal second, Valentina felt all the blood drain from her body. She stepped back slowly, as if each step stripped away a piece of her dignity. An event staff security guard approached and, without saying a word, discreetly led her to the side exit. She didn't resist. She just walked, eyes filled with tears, face turned toward the marble floor she knew so well. Outside, the wind was cold and sharp. She sat down on the curb, took off her gloves, and let the tears fall freely. She didn't care about hiding anymore. The pain wasn't just the public humiliation. It was the fact that when she needed it most, Nate remained silent. That night, when she got home, she hugged her mother like she was trying to rebuild herself in her arms. And there, still wearing her uniform, she made herself a promise in a trembling voice. "I'm never going back to that world. I'll never let anyone make me feel like I'm less again." But fate, as that one, doesn't follow human promises, and she didn't yet know that everything was just beginning. The next morning dawned suffocating, even though the San Diego sky was clear and blue. Inside the mirrored headquarters of the Ellison Group, however, the atmosphere was different. In the glass-walled hallways, the air conditioning couldn't cool down the tension spreading through the executive floors. Employees whispered in corners, eyes quickly turned away whenever Nate Ellison passed by. The once admiring glances now carried judgment and pity. Outside, newspapers were already circulating with bold headlines. Ellison Group CEO caught in social scandal, cleaning staff humiliated at high society event. Nate Ellison remains silent during attack on woman of humble origins, becomes target of online protests. On Nate's phone screen, notifications exploded like bombs in real time. Unread messages from shareholders, emails from the PR team trying to contain the crisis, declined interview requests. The images from the event, with Valentina being exposed, surrounded by mocking smiles, and him frozen, speechless, were going viral by the hour. The phone rang again. Nate didn't answer. He sat in the dark leather chair in his office with the panoramic ocean view, but the scenery seemed distant. The Pacific breeze he used to admire was now just a bitter reminder that everything around him kept moving, except him. The door opened with a controlled force. Robert Ellison walked in like a general stepping onto a battlefield. His perfectly combed white hair and navy blue English-cut suit looked like part of a suit of armor. In his hand, a tablet with the full image crisis report. "You know what embarrasses me the most?" he asked, his voice low and sharp. "It wasn't the scandal. It was your silence. You didn't defend your company. You didn't defend your name. And you didn't even have the courage to defend the woman you put in that situation." Nate slowly looked up. His face was worn. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw. His gaze fixed like someone who was finally beginning to understand the extent of the damage. "She didn't deserve that," he murmured. "But I froze. I didn't know what to do. It all happened so fast." "That's the difference between you and a leader, Nathaniel," his father said, merciless. "Leaders don't freeze. They act." Robert placed the tablet firmly on the desk and crossed his arms. "The board voted. You're being temporarily removed from the presidency. Starting today, you're out of executive decisions, and I suggest you stay away from the media until this blows over." The words were delivered with the coldness of someone signing a sentence. Nate didn't respond right away. He simply nodded slowly. Inside, something was breaking. But unlike other times, he didn't try to defend himself. Maybe because he knew he deserved it. That night, with no assistants or drivers escorting him, he walked alone through the streets he normally crossed behind tinted glass. He wore dark jeans and a worn brown leather jacket he rarely used. His hair tousled by the wind, no longer held that calculated control. People didn't recognize him, or pretended not to. He stepped into a small diner near the Ocean Beach neighborhood, one he had visited discreetly during his college years. He ordered a black coffee and sat near the window, watching cars pass. On the TV hanging in the corner, the news was still about him. Divided reactions. Nate Ellison falls silent during crisis, loses favor with investors. He lowered his head, but it wasn't wounded pride that hurt the most. It was Valentina's face, the look she gave him in the ballroom, silently begging for a single word. And he said nothing. He remembered the dinner, her shy smile when she talked about unfinished books, the honesty in her voice when she spoke of her struggles without ever playing the victim, the beautiful silence that had existed between them, a silence that now screamed in his gut. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken. He took the last sip of coffee, stood up slowly, and walked toward the ocean. He stopped in front of the water and took a deep breath. The sound of the waves was the only thing not judging him, and there, alone on the cold sand, Nate Ellison, the man who had always had everything, tasted for the first time the dry bitterness of solitude. But more than that, he felt the pain of realizing he had only begun to see the truth, when it was already too late. Nate's fall silenced the spotlights, but while he tried to understand who he was without the weight of his last name on the other side of town, Valentina Reyes was learning to rebuild herself from the pieces. The garage of the small rented house in Logan Heights had always been dark, stuffy, and filled with old boxes. For years, it had only served as storage for broken tools and shelved dreams, but now it had a new meaning. Valentina sat in front of an old sewing machine lent to her by Donna Lucia, her 80-year-old neighbor, who had kept it since the 1970s. Christmas lights taped around the door served as makeshift lighting. On the floor, scraps of fabric, colorful threads, handmade patterns, and crayon sketches on recycled paper. A small radio played a local station, with soft Latin music, while her mother, lying on the couch in the next room, napped among blankets and medicine. With each stitch, Valentina unraveled a little of her pain. The public humiliation, the judgmental eyes, Nate's silence. But now what moved her wasn't revenge, it was restoration. She couldn't change what had been done to her, but she could choose what to do with what was left. Sewing is like healing from the inside, she whispered, not realizing she'd said it aloud. Lucia, who had come in carrying 2 pieces of fabric on her lap, smiled from the doorway. That's exactly it, Mija. When my hands were busy, my heart hurt less. Valentina smiled back. It was a shy smile, but sincere. She took the floral fabric in her hands and ran her fingers over it with care. Was this from one of your dresses? It belonged to my daughter. She wore it to my granddaughter's baptism. It's old, but the fabric still has life, just like you. Valentina's eyes welled up. She nodded silently and kept sewing. With Lucia's help, she started photographing the simple dresses she made and posting them in local social media groups. Clothes made from donated scraps with delicate embroidery and names that told stories. Esperanza, Raíces, Southern Light. Each piece carried more than stitches, it carried soul. Ordinary people began to comment, to ask for prices, to order for daughters, for baptisms, for modest weddings. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay for her mother's medicine, buy milk, and keep the rent paid on time. One night, while she was finishing the trim on a light blue dress with an embroidered collar, her younger brother walked in holding a tablet. Val, look at this. You're on Clara Ortega's Insta, that influencer who lives here in the neighborhood. Valentina wiped her hands on a cloth and came closer. In the video, Clara smiled at the camera as she spun around in a dress made by Valentina. This beautiful piece is by Valentina, a local designer from the neighborhood. handmade with repurposed fabric and a whole lot of love. Follow her, because talent like this shouldn't stay hidden. Valentina was in shock for a few seconds. "She's wearing my dress," she whispered. Lucia, watching from the doorway with teary eyes, stepped forward and squeezed her hand. "You don't have to be invisible anymore. People are finally seeing you." Valentina felt a mix of fear and pride. She knew that by becoming visible, she also became vulnerable again. But now it was different. Now she didn't depend on anyone's approval. She had made herself with her own hands. And as she looked at the sewing table, with loose threads, needles, fabric, and cold coffee in a glass, she felt certain of something simple and powerful. She didn't need a big name. Her own name was enough. But fate, that old master of twists, still had plans in store, and the next order she would receive would come from an unexpected sender. The sudden success of Valentina's creations began to spread like wildfire among the working women of the community. Dresses with poetic names and delicate details became a symbol of quiet strength. Still, she kept her feet on the ground, surrounded by donated fabric rolls, modest orders, and sleepless nights. It was on one of those nights, close to midnight, while she struggled with a zipper that wouldn't budge, that a notification popped up on her phone screen. It was a breaking news headline. Robert Ellison, founder of Ellison Group, under investigation for corruption and tampering with public records. Valentina's heart clenched. The article said crucial documents had gone missing, records that could prove part of the properties donated to social projects, once praised as philanthropic efforts, had actually been used for money laundering and backdoor deals with local politicians. The company was facing moral collapse. Nate had made no statement. Valentina slowly sat down, the dress forgotten in her lap. Then, like a sudden snap, she remembered something. That fateful night in Nate's office, before everything fell apart, she had knocked over a folder while cleaning the bookshelf. She remembered picking up the papers from the floor, and among them, an old contract signed by Robert Ellison and an out-of-state partner. A document marked with stamps and dates that didn't match the official records now mentioned in the investigation. At the time, she thought it was just another bureaucratic paper. But now, that document might be the one thing capable of clearing or condemning. She opened the box where she kept old notes, paid bills, and mementos from her cleaning days. There it was, the contract. She sat with the document in her hands, eyes fixed, unmoving. Her younger brother appeared at the garage door holding a slice of bread. "Val, you okay?" She took a moment to answer. I think I have something that could change everything." The next day, Valentina went to Donna Lucia's house and asked for advice. They sat under the lemon tree's shade, while an old radio played softly in the background. She told her everything, from the contract to the dilemma growing inside her chest. "He left me alone, but this isn't about him. It's about doing the right thing." Lucia held her hands tightly. "Justice is a very thin line between pride and conscience, and you, my daughter, have always known the difference." With a tight heart, Valentina took a deep breath and typed a message. "I need to give you something. It's important. I'm doing this because I believe injustice can't be fought with silence." By late afternoon, Nate appeared in front of the garage. He looked worn out, his hair messy, beard grown, and his eyes deeply marked by sleepless nights. He wore simple clothes, far from the imposing man he had been weeks ago. "Thank you for answering me," he said in a hoarse voice. She looked at him firmly. "I'm not doing this for you, not for your father either. I'm doing this for me, because the day I accept staying silent in the face of what's wrong, I stop being who I am." She handed him the envelope with the contract, sealed and labeled. Nate held the document with both hands, in silence. "This could save his reputation," he murmured, "and the company's. Or it could show That no one is above consequences, she replied. Use it however you see fit, but don't hide it. For a moment, the two of them stood there face to face, like two worlds that had crossed at an unlikely point in life. And then, without asking for anything in return, she took a step back and returned to her sewing table. Nate looked at her once more but understood that this wasn't the time to try and make things right. That night, he would turn the document into the authorities, and with that face the wrath of his own father. But in Valentina's heart, for the first time in a long while, justice felt bigger than the pain, and the day was still to come when destiny would return everything that had once been taken from her. The morning was warm in Logan Heights, and Valentina's little makeshift studio pulsed with life. A new order came in every day, and now she had the help of two young neighbors who came to learn sewing in their spare time. The space smelled of fresh coffee, cotton thread, and hope. Even amid the simplicity, shelves made from produce crates, a sewing table with an uneven top, patterns hanging with clothespins, that place had become a sanctuary. It was there that Valentina stitched more than dresses. She stitched strength and faith in herself. Then one sunny Tuesday just before lunch, she heard knocks on the wooden door that opened to the street. She wiped her hands on her apron, still, with pins stuck in her sleeve, and went to answer. When she opened the door, her heart pounded like a drum. Nate was there. No suit, no pretense. He wore dark jeans, a plain black t-shirt, his hair loose in the wind, and an expression that blended shame with a rare kind of honesty. His grayish-blue eyes looked lighter now, like they were no longer hiding anything. "Valentina, I didn't know if you'd let me in," he said quietly. She didn't answer. She just stood there, hand still on the doorknob. The silence was thick like raw fabric. "I was a coward," he continued, "and you were the only person who never wanted anything from me, except respect." Valentina looked away. There was a lump in her throat. She'd prepared herself for an apology, but not for seeing him like this. "Why now?" she asked, her tone unsoftened. "After everything that's happened, after you fell, lost your power, got rejected, is that why you came?" "No," he replied firmly. "I came because I finally started to see what you already saw, because it hurt, because I lost something no money, title or last name can replace." She crossed her arms. "And what exactly do you think you lost?" "You," he answered without hesitation. "And what could have existed between us if I had been man enough to defend you?" The weight of those words hit her harder than she expected. Instinctively, she took a step back. "I don't know if I can forgive. I'm not expecting you to forgive me now. I just want to try to do things right this time, and if you'll let me, get to know your life, not from a distance, but for real." She hesitated, then pointed to the wooden bench in the shade, by the garage. "You can sit, but no promises." Nate obeyed. He sat down slowly, like someone who understands they're stepping on sacred ground. That afternoon, he stayed silent while she worked. Sometimes he offered to fold fabric, other times he just watched. He didn't talk about reconciliation. He didn't ask for love. He asked for time. In the days that followed, he came back, always gently. Sometimes he brought fresh bread from the neighborhood bakery. Other times, he showed up with math books for Valentina's younger brother, sat with him on the floor, and explained formulas that once seemed impossible. Slowly, the boy began waiting for him at the door, like someone finally being seen. Nate met Valentina's mother. He brought her flowers on her birthday. He helped Lucia fix the fence in the back. He invited the girls from the studio to visit, a community center he had started supporting, using what was left of his influence to do something with purpose. Valentina watched everything from a distance, without rushing. She was no longer the young woman who dreamed of happy endings wrapped in promises. Now she believed in actions. And for the first time, Nate seemed to understand that. It was on an ordinary night, when the garage light was dimmer and the radio played an old bolero, that he came closer slowly, holding a cup of tea. She was finishing the hem on a lilac dress. "I still don't know if I deserve your forgiveness," he said. She looked up gently. "And I still don't know if I can give it." But in that look, there was something new. It wasn't rejection, it was space. And sometimes, it's in space that love begins to rebuild. Time passed the way a strong stitch moves along the hem of a dress, thread by thread, stitch by stitch, day by day. 1 year later, Valentina Reyes' life was no longer the same. But her heart remained, faithful to what truly mattered. The garage had become a real studio. The walls, once peeling, were now covered with patterns, sketches, and photos of real women proudly wearing her creations. There was a small display window at the front of the house and a simple sign full of meaning, "Reyes' Fashion with Soul." That sunny afternoon, the entire neighborhood community center had been decorated with recycled paper flowers, lights hanging between poles, and wooden benches surrounding a makeshift runway made of old rugs sewn together by hand. Children ran. Between guests, neighborhood women helped with the food, and the sound of a guitar in the background added a nearly cinematic warmth. It was the day of Valentina's first official collection. Flowers that grow from concrete. Each dress carried a story, fabric repurposed from curtains, old sheets, neighbor donations, and patches of memories. And the models? Everyday women. Single mothers, elderly women, young girls from the neighborhood. No top models, just real people. Valentina, wearing a beige outfit with hand-embroidered details and a scarf tied in her hair, walked among them with a racing heart. She knew that night wasn't about fashion. It was about visibility, about claiming a space she had long been told wasn't hers. Among the guests, he was there. Nate, sitting quietly in the second row, wearing a plain cotton t-shirt, khaki pants, and longer hair brushed back. Now the owner of a small social construction company, he was renovating homes for low-income families and employing former inmates and at-risk youth. He had traded the suit for working hands, and for the first time in a long time, he looked whole. When the final dress received applause and the music stopped, Valentina was called to the microphone by one of the organizers. She walked toward it, eyes shining, emotional. Before she could speak, a voice echoed from the crowd. "Wait, can I say something before you?" Everyone turned around. It was Nate. He walked slowly to the center, his hands trembling slightly, but his eyes steady. Valentina looked at him, surprised, unsure of what was coming. He took the microphone, took a deep breath. "Good evening. I'm not a fashion designer, I'm not an artist, but I know what it's like to build something with your hands. And today, I want to talk about what brought me here." He paused, looking at Valentina. "A year ago, I was a broken man, heir to everything and owner of nothing. I lost credibility, lost status, lost the right to be heard. But what hurt the most was losing her gaze. The look of someone who only ever asked to be respected. Someone who never wanted anything and except truth." People glanced at one another, some visibly moved, others filmed in silence. "She taught me that love isn't a pedestal, it's ground, it's roots, it's work." And so, he knelt. The audience held its breath. Valentina raised her hand to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. "Valentina Reyes, this time I want to stay on the ground, because it's where I learned what real love is. And if you'll let me, I want to walk by your side, not to save you, but to grow with you." The silence was broken by a soft sob from Valentina's mother, seated in the back with Lucia. Valentina, through tears, slowly stepped down from the small stage and stood in front of him. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "More than anything." She held out her hand, her eyes filled with emotion. "Then stand up, because I don't want anyone on their knees. I want someone whole, someone who chooses to be here and stays." He stood up slowly, and the two embraced right there, in front of everyone. There was no luxury, no press flashes, just the warm glow of hanging lights and the sound of genuine applause from people who know how to recognize courage when they see it. In that moment, Valentina understood. Life may have taken a lot from her, but it had given everything back. With interest, the last light of the night hung softly over the courtyard of the community center as the guests began to say their goodbyes. The patchwork runway was marked with the footprints of women who had walked it with their heads held high. The smell of coffee, sweet bread, and handmade flowers still lingered in the air. Valentina watched it all from a distance, sitting beside Nate on a simple wooden bench. He held her hand gently, like someone who knows that love isn't possession, it's presence. The two of them sat in silence, watching the slow breakdown of an event that wasn't just a fashion show. It was the harvest of everything she had planted with pain, patience, and faith. The wind passed lightly through the strands of her hair, now tied in a loose bun. Valentina's deep brown eyes looked more profound than ever, and there, in that pause between the end of one cycle and the start of another, she took a deep breath. The narration began like a whisper from the soul, in voiceover, over images of her sewing, of her brother smiling with books in hand, of Lucia hanging clothes on the line, of Nate laughing with the neighborhood kids, of dresses spinning to the sound of laughter. It wasn't luxury that changed my life. It was the love that saw who I was, even when I was invisible to the world. The camera shows the garage studio lit with soft yellow lights, filled with fabric, patterns and smiles. Valentina runs, her fingers over an embroidered design, as if touching a memory. The floor I used to clean became the ground where I planted my future. The images alternate between past and present, her silently cleaning floors, then sewing for single mothers who hug her when they receive their dresses. And I learned that true love doesn't rise above you. It comes down to where you are and grows with you. The narration ends as she walks through the neighborhood with Nate, holding hands not between flashes or luxury cars, but among trees, laughter, and the soft glow of streetlights. People greet them naturally as a living part of the community. They stop in front of a wall where a colorful mural has been painted. It shows a woman with a sewing machine and roots growing from her feet, blooming into flowers at her chest. Beside it the words, "Dignity sewn by hand." Valentina smiles. Nate wraps his arm around her shoulders and kisses her forehead. And there, in that unpretentious ending, love finally bloomed. Not like a fairy tale, but like real life, full of scars and beauty. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments. I really want to know how this journey touched you. If you liked it, give the video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who also believes in the power of true love, and subscribe to the channel to follow all the upcoming stories. And before you go, stay here with me just a little longer. I've picked another emotional story that's going to touch your heart even deeper. You won't want to miss it.